All right, so welcome to the Linguistic Communication Development Center's space. We are so proud to host tonight's workshop with Mary Gonzalez. The Linguistic Communication Development Center is a nascent 501c3 organization dedicated to teaching practical communication skills to anyone in need. We just received a great award for the 2022 Social Justice Pitch Fest for our entrepreneurship in digital media literacy, which is a program that teaches older adults the skills necessary to accomplish their personal and business tasks online. In today's technological ecology, that knowledge is so essential. And programs that really teach older adults navigational skills online are limited. Tonight, we're going to focus on assertive communication, something that we can do online, in person, in our relationships and at work. Mary Margaret Gonzalez is a graduate student at San Diego State University. She earned her bachelor's of science degree in health communication. I met Mary and was immediately impressed because she was in the spaces dedicated to creating a more compassionate, inclusive, and generous world. Mary today enjoys teaching communication to incoming first-year students, and her research explores the benefits of assertive communication in healthcare settings, research that she extends into the personal and social context as well. So I'm so grateful. We are grateful to have Mary here tonight, and we're going to workshop assertive communication and see if we can accomplish the goals we want to accomplish. Thank you, Mary. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Reese, for that generous introduction. I appreciate that. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm going to start off. Let me just screen share real quick. And let's see. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And pardon me, just one moment. Mm-hmm. Just one moment, sorry. Just trying to screen share, just one moment, I apologize.
That's all right, take your time. We're all friends.
Oh, there we go, perfect, all right. Oh, okay. Great. All right. So here we are at our assertive communication workshop, like Reese said. And just a quick introduction and purpose. So this workshop was designed for the members, clients, and friends alike of the Linguistic Communication Development Center, or LCDC for short. And so through some applicable research and different experiences that I've had, I've kind of put together what I hope will be a little toolkit that you can walk away from and apply in your life. And as Reese explained, this is applied to my passion and research interest is in healthcare settings, but I have some, we're going to be talking about context of interpersonal as well as healthcare, as was mentioned, and school and work life. So that is, and then Reese kind of told about me, which I appreciate. And then, yes, as she brought up, the way we met was in the Civil Corps organization, which is a volunteer organization at San Diego State that focuses on spreading kindness and civility, both on campus and in the community. And so I have some fun pictures here of some of the memories. I have Reese here at volunteering at a local elementary school, and then just some other fun activities that we did. So that's kind of the special history I have with the LCDC. So, and I also, just speaking of the Linguistic Communication Development Center, from their mission statement that is available online, they talk about being communicators with heart. And they also say they urge socially vulnerable communities towards social evolution by teaching culturally aware communication methods. They say we develop innovative needs-based educational programs that improve the quality of written, verbal, and digital communication. So I just wanted to bring up a piece of the LCDC's mission and vision statement. Because I'm honored to be able to connect with that in this space here tonight. So thank you again. So what I want to start with as well is just the quick goals and objectives of our time together. So I want us to first really get defined on what assertive communication is. It's not necessarily as straightforward as one might think, and also to kind of understand the differences and nuance between passive, assertive, and aggressive communication. And then also, as was already explained, how to apply those to various contexts in our life that will be helpful. So I want to start off with just to bring to your attention in the chat, if you want, if we were doing like an all-day workshop together, then we would actually go ahead and take this self-assessment quiz right now. But just in the interest of time, I've dropped it in the chat if that's of interest to you. I love self-assessment quizzes on a variety of different topics. And I definitely think that whatever the topic you're trying to learn about is, it's nice to kind of do a self-assessment, see where you're at. So anyway, that's in the chat. So take that with you and do that in either later this evening or on your own time. And I dropped one in that I think is really good. It's from the Pro Consulting firm, ProMind Consulting 2021. So I want to start off with the definition of assertive communication. So I have here kind of a visual of the continuum. And I want us all to kind of be thinking where we're at on the continuum. We have passive communication, assertive communication, and aggressive communication. Technically, there's a fourth one being passive aggressive communication, but just in the interest of what we're going to be discussing tonight, we're just going to focus on those three. So within those three, so passive, you're kind of getting stepped on. Aggressive communication, I'm kind of stepping on you. In assertive communication, no one's stepping on each other, and both are protected, if you will. And I also just want to clarify real quickly too, that I am not at all suggesting that anyone is communicating wrong. So if you're more of an aggressive communicator or more of a passive communicator, I am certainly not here telling you that you are doing it wrong. I am here suggesting that I believe, based on the research that I've done and just personal experiences and interviews I've done with people, I argue that assertive is generally the best way, mainly because it's the most effective and will get you where you need to go. But certainly there are times to be aggressive communicators and times to be passive communicators. So just want to kind of put that out in the beginning. So there's a journal article entitled "The Difference Between Passive Aggressive and Assertive Communication" that the next few minutes I will be deriving this information from. So again, visually looking at these three types of communications, let's all just kind of be thinking to ourselves for a moment where we are on the continuum. Because I definitely think at different times in our lives, we're going to be in different places depending on what's going on or what season of life you're at. I also want to point out that within these three, there's a little bit more of a nuance within the box of assertive. So even if you are labeled as an assertive communicator, you still could be more on the aggressive side of assertive communication or a little bit more on the passive side of assertive communication. So just kind of be thinking of that in your mind and be thinking of where you're at on the continuum as we keep going forward. So what exactly is the definition of assertive communication? And again, we have I really like this visual where again, we have aggressive over here, we have passive over here, and assertive is just this nice marriage of the two kind of in the middle. So one of the definitions from Maloney 2019 is that assertive communication is showing confidence and standing up for personal rights in a direct and honest way. So I really like that definition. And I used to think that assertive communication and aggressive communication, I used to think that those were pretty much one and the same. And I'll share more about that in just a few moments, but I really appreciate this definition that kind of clarifies kind of where assertive is, showing confidence and standing up for one's personal rights. So some synonyms for assertive are the following. We have positive, we have self-assured, we have firm, we have determined, and I put self-confident last here and in red just to kind of bullet point self-confident, because I argue and make the it's my belief that there's a direct correlation between, and research also suggests this, that there is a correlation between assertive communication and self-confidence. And why I believe that's so important is because if you are self-confident, then navigating the various areas and contexts of your life produces more positive results. And so again, the self-confidence that comes from assertive communication is one of the many reasons I get so excited about it. So let's go through a few specifics. So let's start putting some tools in our toolkit. How do we be assertive communicators, right? Because that can kind of sound ambiguous. Like, okay, I'll just go assertively communicate. Like, what does that even mean? So let's get specific here. So when we are communicating assertively, one of the things we're doing is we are using I statements. And some of you might be familiar with this and some of you might not. But basically, in an example of if someone has made you upset, we can all relate to being upset, angry, things of that nature. The phrase "you made me angry" would be considered an aggressive communication. And again, there might be a time where that's the best way to do it. But in the context of we're trying to be more assertive, the assertive way to say that same statement is I felt angry. So it's just kind of that little switch that kind of we communicate the same thing, but we're not stepping on them, they're not stepping on us. We're in that assertive space. A second tool to specifically communicate assertively is to focus on the behavior, which is so hard to do. All these things are easier said than done, of course, but we want to focus on the behavior. So, not talking about that someone's a jerk or they were so rude or whatever, name calling or anything like that. We want to focus on what was it they did. When you showed up late, I felt this. We agreed that you would get your portion of the project done by this time. And when you didn't, it put me in a stress mode. And this is how that affected me. So we're not talking about them personally. We're talking about the behavior. So again, I have that example here. It made me feel frustrated when the deadline for our group project came. Any one of us that are students currently or have been a student before, I think, can relate to this. Group projects. So it made me feel frustrated when the deadline for our group project came and not everyone had their part turned in. When do you think you would be able to have your part turned in? And I've kind of added here, this is just kind of my own personal addition to this, is that I like action items going forward, solution-oriented action items. So instead of just, okay, let's walk away and you know where I stand, how can we maybe problem solve this? So instead of just someone realizing, hey, when you didn't do this behavior, it put me in this negative place, how can we move forward? What can we do to make sure that you do get it turned in when you need to, when you need to from now on. And also keeping your responses short. That is another tool in the toolkit of assertive behavior. And one of the reasons why, there's a reason to it. The longer a response or the communication is when you're trying to get a point across, the longer it is, the easier it is to either slip into passive or to slip into aggressive. Assertive communication is kind of short, sweet, nice, and tight. This makes me think of, so as an instructor, I mean, I love my students, I love communicating with my students, but I respond probably the best to assertive communication. And when communication is lengthy, either via email or in my office, the longer it is, it starts to either get a little aggressive or get super passive. So passive would be like, oh my gosh, I'm just apologizing profusely over and over. I know you're probably not going to let me do this, but I figured I'd ask anyway. And I'm probably letting you down. And kind of that gets into passive. And then aggressive kind of gets into the, oh, well, they didn't do this. And, my partner didn't do this, or, that wasn't really fair. We kind of get off into aggressive. So when an email comes in or face-to-face conversation comes in and it's kind of short and sweet and to the point, you can probably practice a little bit more. The assertiveness kind of comes through in that. So again, according to Harris 2013, they definitely suggest that let's keep the responses short. This next one, monitoring your tone of voice and nonverbal messages. I mean, we could have a week-long workshop on just nonverbal messages and tone of voice, right? But it just deserves a quick little mention here that tone of voice, whether it's in email or in person, is so important to communicate assertively. Speaking of students, again, I had a student this last semester that was a great student, great person, but they had gotten into a situation where they had some things going on where they were communicating with the administration. And they came and talked to me about it, and I was happy to offer help and support. And they showed me the emails. I'd been hearing about how rude, their words, how rude and awful that this communication was coming from the administrator personnel that they were talking with. And then they showed me their communication, the email they wrote. And I asked them, I said, can I give you some critical feedback here? And they were like, yeah, anything. And I let them know that their communication style was very aggressive. And I kind of explained to them, we kind of worked through, I gave them some tips of how to take that. It's okay, you feel how you feel, and it's okay that you're saying what you're saying, but it's coming off really aggressive. And we kind of worked together. I gave them some tips and they changed it into the assertive. And some things ended up kind of working out, not just because of my advice, but it's different. It's interesting. And it's hard sometimes for us to see when it's us, it's hard to see that we're coming off aggressive. We don't realize it. So again, just a quick but important mention of monitoring the tone, whether it's an email or in person, to make sure we're hitting that sweet spot. And then the last one, and I put this in red, is listening. So research shows that assertive communicators, they're good listeners, and they are intentional listeners. And there's many reasons why, but the one I want to really focus on and kind of bring to light, one of the reasons why assertive communicators are good listeners is because they end up with all the information. So if you are sitting with, the context is school, and you're with the group that you're working on a project with, or you're at work and you're in a meeting, the ones that are listening, really listening, like not just the words, but literally taking it in, they have all the information. So then when you do bring up your point, when you do, hey, I'm not going to, nope, I don't think we should do this. Yet whatever it is, if you're taking a stand or you're communicating assertively, if you have all the information because you've been listening to it all and you've taken it in, then you're going to be, you are going to be more well received, and your thoughts and ideas are going to be well received. And we need that. We need all, like some of us were discussing for a few minutes before this workshop started. We need everybody's voice. We need you all. We need everybody's voice. And so the more listeners we have, then the more voices we're going to have, because those listeners are going to pick up on those voices. So again, the listening aspect, and these are all such good, I think these are all such good reminders. They're all kind of maybe things we might know, but they're just kind of a good reminder. So really quickly before I move on to some more examples, any thoughts or questions, just kind of as you've been thinking of where you're at on the continuum, or as we're just kind of discussing this, any kind of questions or thoughts or things? I mean, I'd be happy to just kind of hear any thoughts that any of you are having. We might not have met before, but I'm excited to hear what any of you have to say. If anyone, I'm looking around. Hi, Reese, please.
I'm interested in knowing what is aggressive. Like in the example you gave where you helped the student or the person with their email and their communication, what was aggressive about it? Because I believe that I don't cross the line, but I want to make sure.
Oh, excellent. That is an excellent question. And of course, there is a lot of relativity here, of course. I mean, there's maybe what I think is aggressive, what someone else is taking as aggressive. So, but that is an excellent question. So in the example of the student, they were focusing on what the personnel had done, and they were saying this was wrong what you did. I'm trying to explain this without like with keeping privacy issues. They were telling, they did not like how the personnel was talking to them, and they actually used the word rude. And I would say that the administrator they were probably being aggressive, but it was in context of, we are kind of the school and this is what we're doing. And I think the student got their feelings hurt, understandably so. I think they took it personal. And so instead of focusing on the actual action item at hand, the action item that needed to be done to fulfill the requirement to, make it so the student and the personnel would not have to talk anymore, the feelings got hurt and the student was making it personal, saying they were being rude, saying things like that. So that's why I categorized it as aggressive, because it was getting personal. They thought that they thought that the personnel had been personal to them. In my opinion, they had not. They weren't being like mushy and lovey and like you're awesome, do this thing you need to do and we'll all be okay. They were being very direct. But that's does that kind of help in that example I gave? Thank you for asking too, because that kind of, without having the full story, you're like, oh, okay, well, they were being aggressive, but how? So thank you for following up on that. So I have a couple more examples in three different settings. I'm going to have an example in healthcare setting, in work and personal life, and interpersonal. So taking the macro, going out, and then we'll zoom into micro. So some more tools for our assertive communication toolkit, three more ideas, like templates, if you will. So I'll just go through the three real quick and then come back and fill in the blanks. So one of them, the template is when you say the behavior, I felt. We already kind of talked about this already, but that's the first one. The second one is when you did, list the action, I understood it to mean, and then you say your interpretation. And why that one is so awesome is because you get to say what you really think, but then you also give the other person a chance to clarify and say, oh, that was not, your interpretation was not the intention. And we can kind of, both parties can stay assertive. This is my stance, but let's at least clarify where we're at. And then the third one is I see or perceive a behavior, tone, word choice to mean, and again, the interpretation of that. So those are the templates, if you will. So let me quickly kind of apply these into real life. So in the context of school and work, we already kind of went that over. I kind of prematurely went over that one. But again, the work project, the school project where, hey, this is how it affected me when you didn't get your thing done on time. The second example is in work. Hey, when I had to cover your work because you came in late, it put me in a really difficult position. If you're going to be late or not show up, I really need to know as soon as advance as possible. Medical or family emergency, I understand, but bearing something like that, I really need to know so that I can make other arrangements. Let's make sure we do that in the future. Thank you. So that's assertive. That's letting the person know that's the behavior, what they're doing is not working for you, but we have a little solution oriented there. You're not saying you're not saying you're a loser, you're the worst worker I've worked with, your worst colleague. You're not getting into any of that. You're saying when you did this is how it affected me. And let's try to change that if we can to move forward. So this I'm going to give now for our second template of when you said this, I understood this to mean. I'm going to apply a healthcare setting, and I just need to make a distinct disclaimer. We are talking about healthcare here, but I am in no way giving medical advice at all. So I just want to make that very clear. Most of my research has to do with health communication and healthcare settings. So this is what I research, and this is what I'm passionate about. And just a little, just to clarify here as well, a lot of my research has to do with healthcare disparities and the many barriers that exist, whether it's certain populations not receiving the healthcare that they need, or the various patient-provider communication breakdowns. So I get excited and I nerd out over assertive communication because I believe that with so many barriers that we can't fix today or tomorrow, or even maybe in the near future, but I believe that assertive communication, when applied in healthcare settings, can actually positively affect someone's health. And I get excited about that because I feel like that's way more in our hands and tangible than maybe some of the other problems. So there's just the clarification of that and kind of the lens that I come to from this. So let's look at this example. So in the first example here, it's in the context of someone going to their healthcare provider, not for anything necessarily serious, but just kind of something that's more has to do with their regular healthcare routine. So with the template of, when you said this, I understood this to mean this. So this is how you can apply the template to that. When you said that the only option was to go on a medication that I already shared with you that my insurance does not cover, and I therefore can't afford to go on it, so it's kind of not an option right now to go on it, it kind of made me feel scared and vulnerable. Could you please discuss maybe some alternative options and maybe some action items that I could do in the meantime while I continue to try to work this out with my health insurance? Thank you. So here we have, again, someone kind of standing up for kind of their needs, but not being aggressive, not, I'm gonna, just not getting aggressive, but not just passively leaving. Oh, okay, I don't want to bring up anything because, what do I know? They're the doctor. Like, hey, I need, like, when you're kind of talking about this medication, it doesn't make sense because we already kind of talked about it right now. I can't go on it. So what over-the-counter methods, or what other things can I do so I at least am doing the best I can to help my health situation while I try to figure that out. The next example I have is someone who is kind of an advocate for their parents, and their parents' second language is English. So sometimes we have a health literacy situation going on. And so with this same template, the person says to the healthcare provider, hey, my parents' first language is not English. So what you just explained to them about their condition, I don't think is 100% understood. So how can we solve this? Could you maybe explain it again and maybe this time go slower? Or do you have an interpreter that you use for patients? If not, do you have, is there another solution to this issue? Or could you kind of maybe direct me to someone who could help with this circumstance? Thank you. So again, assertively bringing up the problem, asking the person or persons that you're dealing with to kind of help be a part of the solution. Hey, you need to know, it needs to be clear that that your patients are not understanding what you said. Kind of what can we do about that? And then any thoughts on that, or any questions there? Yes, Reese.
It is so important to communicate with doctors and healthcare providers assertively. So many times I feel, even I, as someone who worked in nursing for 13 years, when the doctor starts talking to me like they have this authority over what I'm going to do with my body, it feels so frustrating. And I get quiet and I get compliant. And I say yes when I really don't mean yes. I pretend like I'm going to do what they say when I know I'm not. And, that really, that's a barrier between me and my provider, not being honest and truthful. And that's on me. I have to take ownership, right? Is what you're saying. I need to say, well, the information you just shared with me makes me feel this way and then I need to address that. So, wow, that's truly important. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you so much, Reese. I appreciate you bringing that up and I absolutely know what you're saying. I definitely have white coat syndrome. And even though I might know a lot of this stuff on a logical level and how important it is, I absolutely get in that zone where I'm like, oh, I don't want them to think I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't want them to think I'm not smart, or I absolutely know what you're talking about. And so there are those situations where there's a radical barrier, but I feel like even in situations where there's not a radical barrier between a patient and their healthcare provider, there still can be the barrier just because of those things that we just discussed. And absolutely. So again, this is, I hope all of this is just helpful, something you to think about. This is not to make anyone think that they're not doing it right or that anything like that, but just to maybe rethink, okay, if I really don't get what they're saying, I should say something. And again, I know this is hard, so don't mistake me just going, oh, just say this or just think of it like that. I understand that it's hard. We're talking about our bodies, which are so personal, and healthcare context, even if it's just a regular physical, nothing too emotionally hard type of visit. Those things can really be difficult. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up and sharing with us that, Reese. And I absolutely understand what you're saying on that.
Mary, I have a question for you.
Please, yes, Dr. Dean.
At times, it seems to me like because of cultural differences, which we have many in America,
Sure.
being such a melting pot, and I'm wondering when possibly passive behavior can be rewarding, refreshing. Have you given any consideration to that without, looking at going to a negative place? Are there times that you have found that being passive can actually, help a situation out?
Oh, excellent question. Excellent question. Thank you so much. And the short answer is absolutely yes. To be more specific, in the context of, let's take the context of healthcare settings. So for me personally, if I get too overwhelmed, I know sometimes I just kind of need to get out of that situation. And so it does help me to kind of go back and revisit, the circle back, if you will. Mm-hmm. So absolutely. So just me personally, and again, research shows that in a variety of contexts, passive is going to be better. If someone's in danger, of course. And other times, it is going to be better to keep the peace, even if someone's not, even if someone's life isn't in danger. There's times just to keep the peace. So passive is not the we don't scoff at passive. There are definitely times, and so going back to healthcare settings, if someone is so, in my belief and my opinion, if someone is really overwhelmed to where they kind of can't get their thoughts together, I think it's best the less they say and then go back. So whether it's a lot of patient providers have things online where you can message your doctor. So maybe you could message them later. Hey, thank you for your time. I was a little overwhelmed at our appointment. Would you mind either, whether it's asking to send over the information to you, whether it's another follow-up visit. Hey, I know I just saw you, but could we talk that again? Could we talk on the phone? Mm-hmm. I definitely think a passive place is good to just kind of let's get out of this situation calmly, and then let's revisit.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you? I mean, I'm happy if you might not agree, and that's fine. How does that land on you?
It makes sense to me in a number of ways, because we're talking about being assertive versus being aggressive, and passive is in the middle, as we say, on a linear continuum there. But I just want to make sure that cultural differences are being considered, because it is absolutely inappropriate in some cultures to be assertive.
Absolutely. Yes.
I mean, that is a big cultural no-no.
Absolutely. Yes.
We're talking about healthcare settings of all things. And I'm listening to Reese talk about how she, gets a little hesitant to, be assertive with white coats, as we call them.
Yeah, right. Yeah. White coat syndrome. Yes.
We really do, I think, do a disservice to others who are maybe not like us, if we just consider, and I'm thinking more on a linear scale right now, if we just consider the linear model, which is what I'm hearing, rather than a more inclusive, well-rounded model of the consideration of many other peoples, many other genders, and how they may be relating to the world based upon their own life experiences. And I don't see that, like you said initially, I don't see that as neither right or wrong. I just see that as, how do we get through the quagmire of communicating with others who are not like us without the negativity, going to a negative place through our language. I'm going to give you one quick example, if I may. I know we're running out of time, but in listening to what you were saying, I was reminded of a client I was dealing with just the other day, who said to me, talking about her mate, when he said that to me, I just froze. And I was uncomfortable with freezing because that's usually not how I am at work. Okay. So we have this dichotomy where at work we're one way, and at home we're another. And she was really struggling with trying to come to terms with that. And I like the Venn diagram that you showed earlier, and putting it in the middle it's not easy. It's not easy.
No.
And I just wanted everybody to be mindful of that. What you're talking about is beautiful, and it can work, and it takes a lot of work communication-wise to make sure that it does work. And there are certain trigger words that people hear that set them off and cut off communication, no matter what you are trying to do.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Dean, for sharing with us so poignantly how you did. Thank you. And absolutely, that this is definitely a, kind of based on the time we have and just kind of where we're going with this. Yeah. For sure. There's a lot of nuance and layers that are missing. And this is kind of the lens of what we're talking about tonight, is kind of coming from assuming that someone does have the choice to apply this. And of course we do know that unfortunately not everyone does. I mean, whether it's maybe a domestic violence situation, exactly. Someone knows kind of like if they go home one day and just kind of like, assertive, that's a safety concern. And we know, like you said, different cultures around the world, sometimes there will be, sometimes we see in movies where maybe from our lens, we think someone else and the way that women are treated on another side of the world is not right. And sometimes we try to apply our own, well, they should just tell the husband this. And it's not that. You have centuries of cultural norms that a woman couldn't just go. And I'm using the example of woman, but of course there's a variety of issues with various genders. But just to make the point, like with women, that it would be a danger to them. So yes, thank you for pointing that out. This definitely is coming from the lens that someone could choose when to apply that.
And one more thing.
Yes.
Because I come from a broadcast background, I am mindful of something called vocal training. You touched on that a little bit earlier.
Yes.
And I would encourage any person to get vocal training. There's all kinds of ways to do that online today, especially. It's amazing how other people perceive what they're hearing, what you're saying, when you're saying something, and they may perceive it totally the wrong way.
Yes, because we're basing this all on our own, our own, and kind of, the vocal training, like you said, when we're talking about tone of voice, understand how someone else is hearing it, because that's the most important part, or one of the most important parts.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No.
I use the analogy of a television car commercial. We're all familiar with that, I think.
Yeah, sure.
Television
Yeah.
car commercials.
Yeah.
You've got the hard sell guy,
Yeah.
who's screaming and yelling and shoving it down your throat, and you're like, what's he screaming about,
Right.
And
Right.
then on the other side of that, you've got the really much more moderate, much more smooth female voice who is giving you the same spiel, just in a different way. And it's always interesting to me, because I used to do this experiment a lot in class. It's always interesting to me to note the cognitive processes that are going on in the frontal cortex when both of these commercials are playing.
Sure. Sure.
Most people hate the screamer.
Mm. Right.
When they fill out the questionnaire, they're like, I hated it, screaming, yelling, blah, blah, blah. And he really was excellent at getting the message across, because that company just happened to have one of its best sales years ever. So that's what I just wanted to share about vocal training and learning how to use something we call a voiceover work, and really listening to yourself. I know tape recorders are kind of passe today. I still have one though, because I'm old.
Sure.
So I still have one.
Like, hello.
And I encourage people to always find some advertising copy and read it into some sort of voice activated technology today, and listen back to yourself. You'd be amazed at how many people have never done that. They've never listened to themselves speaking.
Yeah.
And given that public speaking is the number one anxiety producer,
Yes,
I always encourage people to do that when they're trying to communicate, whatever it is they're trying to communicate. Listen to yourself. Get used to it. Get used to your voice, and let other people listen to you when you're not in a situation where you have to go through these issues that we're discussing here. And you'll be amazed at what you hear. You really will. Close your eyes and listen to yourself.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. Because again, the idea, it can kind of seem broad brushed and ambiguous. Like, I'm just going to go be assertive, but I like these more. That's a very specific thing to do.
Exactly. And practice being assertive.
Yeah.
Practice being assertive.
I'm sorry.
And when you hear yourself back, you think, God, that's not me.
Right.
I don't sound like that.
Do you happen to have a contact that you could drop in the chat? Do you happen to know where, people can do their own research, but do you happen to have a way to point us if someone was like, yeah, I want to follow up on voice training? Do you happen to have information?
I was going to say, I don't have anyone specifically now, unfortunately, but you can go to voiceover work.
Okay.
Just enter that in Google.
Okay.
Voiceover work or voice training, what have you. And some community colleges even offer that as part of their communication course.
Perfect.
And if not, look in the radio television section of the school curriculum to see if it's there. But usually it's there today. It wasn't so much when I was your age, but today I noticed that a lot more schools have something like that, vocal training of some kind.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Got more tools in our toolkit. I love it. So I wanted to go across. So again, where you are on the continuum. Oh, by the way, I'm seeing that I've got a lot of stuff in the chat. Reese, is there anything I need to look at that in there? I just noticed that I've got stuff in the chat. If it applies to me, let me know.
I will. No, we're just
cool.
saying.
Okay, cool. So I just wanted to put a few things up here about, so again, depending on where you're at, and this is about where you kind of feel, maybe you kind of feel like you're in a certain place. So really quickly, so I consider myself I use the term kind of jokingly, but I'm kind of being serious. I use the term that I'm a recovering passive communicator. Okay. So kind of the lens that I come from is I think a lot of people can relate to this. I was a people pleaser. I definitely want people around me to be happy. I want authority around me to be happy. I used to think, as I said earlier, that assertive and aggressive were the same thing. So I certainly didn't want to be known as assertive because I thought that would be known as aggressive. And so just kind of through education and just life experiences and a lot of things coming together, I personally learned that kind of middle ground, but not before my pendulum actually. So I was passive. I would say yes to things because I didn't want people mad at me. Just the whole thing. I think a lot of us can relate to that. So then once I learned about this whole, you can be assertive, and I recognize I have the luxury to kind of decide that for myself. My pendulum kind of swung, and I was like aggressive, like no one's going to tell me. And I kind of have had to, and I'm still on this journey, right? Like a lot of us are. I'm kind of in that trying to find. So that's what assertive kind of means to me in my life, is that middle of like, okay, it's not about just everybody being happy and not saying no, but then it's not being like, listen, everyone, I'm going to tell you how it is. It's kind of that middle ground. So just to bring up again, if you're on the continuum where maybe you think that you're a little too aggressive, some of the ideas, and Dr. Dean brought up, triggers. Kind of, if you kind of know your triggers, and again, I want a lot of this to be kind of self-reflective. Maybe if anything I say, or that Reese or Dr. Dean have mentioned, if anything that they have said, this kind of helps you self-reflect, I think that's, time well spent. So kind of knowing your triggers, reflecting on kind of what, are there certain situations and certain people that you get, we all have, I know there's certain situations and certain people that the chances are kind of high that I'll be a little triggered if I'm around that, right? So kind of knowing if you can mitigate that, again, it's a luxury if you can mitigate that. Sometimes you can't help being around people and things that will trigger you. And even in that, saying I disagree is not aggressive. You can absolutely say I disagree. Right. And also if you're on the I'm not assertive enough, if you're like, I'm feeling kind of passive over here, just another thing to put in our tool belt is, let's try not to apologize. I'm all for apologies. Like if it's really something that you really did that was wrong and you really hurt someone, I'm sorry is great. But if you didn't do anything wrong, I personally think, and research shows that it's kind of being pretty passive if you're apologizing, like, I'm sorry to bother you, right? It's a famous phrase, a lot of us say it, but just, I'm sorry to bother you, or, I like, this is the one, this is probably a stupid question. When my students say that, I'm like, no, like, it's not, you don't need to preface that you're sorry to bother me, or that it's probably a stupid question. No, you can just say your question. And so those are kind of some more kind of meat and potatoes of action items we can put in our toolkit. So with that though, we are at 6:54. There's more, so I think I might just have to come back another time and talk to you all, but I definitely want to be cognizant of your time. And so the last thing I just want to mention is that in our in the chat, again, I put the self-assessment quiz if you want to look at that. The other thing I put away, and this is kind of homework, if you will, is I put, I think there's 4 or 5 reflection statements. Just if you on your own kind of want to like maybe take what we talked about tonight and kind of answer these questions, just to kind of get your mind brainstorming about where you fit. But again, I'm excited about it. I think the more we can communicate with each other, the better. Everyone has such great ideas, and I want to hear them all. And so thank you for letting me come and be in this space tonight and to share some of these communicative ideas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. It's good to see you again.
You as well, Dr. Dean. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. That was time well spent, I might say. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We will have to have you come back sometime.
Definitely. Yep. I appreciate that. I didn't want to be assuming, but yep, I've got much more to talk about. So I definitely think we need a part 2.
Wonderful. Wonderful. We'd love to have you back.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, that concludes tonight's workshop on assertive communication. I want to thank everyone who came tonight for being here. And again, Mary, it's always a pleasure and a blessing to have you here. Please come back. Have a good night.